It's not just one room, it's a coordinated operation, a whole system humming quietly. Low mud brick walls hold in the heat, and the ceilings are blackened with soot from years of baking fires. You can already hear movement, soft footsteps, the scrape of baskets, the dull rhythm of grinding stones, starting up like a sleepy orchestra. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take another step forward, and the warmth hits you more fully now. It's not unbearable yet, but it's definitely not a place for sweaters. A few figures move through the shadows. Other bakers already at work. Their movements slow but practiced. Nobody's chatting. One of the overseers passes by, barely glancing at you. He carries a wooden tablet used to keep track of grain and bread production. Bread wasn't just a side dish. It was the foundation of daily life. Most Egyptians ate bread with nearly every meal, and it was often paired with beer. You notice stacks of woven baskets lining one wall, some empty, some filled with grain waiting to be processed. Each basket represents work. As your eyes adjust further, you start to pick out more details. The floor is uneven, worn smooth in places by decades of footsteps. The ovens themselves sit like squat clay domes, dark and silent for now, but you can tell they won't stay that way for long. A faint breeze drifts in from an open doorway, carrying with it the smell of the Nile. Not fresh exactly, but alive, judging by the low glow of embers and the quiet activity already underway. It feels like this place never truly sleeps. Off to the side, you spot something curious, a small clay jar tucked carefully near one of the preparation areas. Something alive, something ancient, something that turns simple grain into something more. But that's for later. For now, the sky outside is lightening just enough to cast a pale glow across the courtyard. The day is beginning, and somewhere, far beyond these walls, Pharaoh will eventually expect his bread. Fresh, perfect, and delivered without excuse, no pressure. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth, the weight of expectation, and the quiet rhythm of the bakery settling into motion. This is your world now, at least for the next few hours. And trust me, it's only going to get hotter from here.
The first real light of day creeps into the courtyard, and with it comes movement, more people, more baskets, more urgency. You don't even get a moment to admire the sunrise before a group of laborers begins filing through the wide entrance, each carrying heavy sacks. The grain has arrived, and just like that, the quiet calm of early morning shifts into something more purposeful. The sacks are dropped in neat, practiced rows, sending up small clouds of dust that hang in the air like a soft, golden fog. You can feel it settling on your skin and hair. Ancient Egyptian exfoliation. Apparently, the grain inside these sacks is mostly immer, wheat, and barley. Immer wheat is a bit stubborn and doesn't separate easily from its husk. That means hours of repetitive labor that will make you question every life choice that brought you here. A scribe stands nearby, marking tallies on a wooden tablet. Every delivery is recorded how much grain comes in and how much bread goes out. Ancient Egypt runs on bread, but it also runs on papyrus wood. An overseer inspects the grain, checking for quality. No mold, no excessive debris. This isn't just food, it's food for Pharaoh. You're motioned forward, and suddenly, you're part of the process. A sack is opened, and you're handed a woven tray. Your job begins sorting. You sift through the grain, removing bits of straw and tiny stones. It's strangely calming at first. Then you find a pebble, then another, and you realize this is going to take a while. Based on what you're seeing, ancient dental work must have been a booming industry. If dentistry had existed, that is. Nearby, workers pour grain into large storage bins made of clay and mud brick, designed to keep the grain dry. Some ancient texts suggest grain storage areas were occasionally guarded by cats, because nothing says secure food supply like a slightly judgmental animal. You continue sorting, your hands moving automatically. The rhythm of the work begins to settle into you. A worker next to you lets out a quiet sigh, the kind that says, "This is my life now." You relate to him on a spiritual level. Once sorted, it's time to move the grain to the grinding area. You help lift a basket and carry it across the courtyard. The grinding area is already alive with activity. Large stone querns are set into the ground, and workers kneel beside them. You can hear the faint grinding sound, a kind of soft, sandy whisper that fills the air. Before you can prepare yourself, you're handed a grinding stone. No instructions, just a silent expectation that you'll figure it out. You kneel, place the grain on the stone surface, and begin to push, back and forth, push, grind, lift, repeat. The grain breaks down into a coarse, sandy flour. Ancient Egyptian bread had character. Let's call it rustic. Very rustic. The sun is higher now, casting long shadows. You can feel sweat beginning to form. The bakery is fully awake, and so are you. This is the heartbeat of the palace, and right now, you're part of it. But this is only the beginning. You haven't even started making the bread yet. Your hands are already beginning to understand the rhythm before your mind fully catches up. Push, grind, lift, repeat. The stone in your hands feels heavier now, not because it changed, but because your arms are quietly negotiating with you about how much longer they're willing to cooperate. The grain beneath the stone slowly transforms, each pass breaking it down into something finer, though still unmistakably rough. You glance at the flour collecting at the edge of your grinding stone. It's not smooth or silky like modern flour. It's coarse, speckled with tiny fragments of husk, and if you rub it between your fingers, it feels almost sandy. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. Ancient Egyptian bread wasn't delicate, it was dense, filling, and occasionally a bit crunchy in ways nobody asked for. A worker nearby shifts slightly and gives you a quick look, the kind that says, "Yes, it's exhausting. No, it doesn't get better." You appreciate the honesty. Grinding grain is one of the oldest human activities, and here in ancient Egypt, it's absolutely essential. Most households would have done this daily, often with women taking on the role. In larger operations like this royal bakery, the work is scaled up. No shortcuts, no machines, just muscle, patience, and a surprising amount of determination. Historians still argue whether the coarseness of Egyptian flour was purely a result of the tools available, or if it was actually preferred for its texture. Standing here, feeling the grit under your fingers, you're leaning toward. They didn't have much of a choice. You adjust your position slightly, trying to find a more comfortable angle. Your knees are starting to protest the hard ground, and your back is already considering filing a formal complaint. But the work continues, steady and unrelenting. Push, grind, lift, repeat. As the pile of flour grows, you begin to notice something else: steeny flecks of stone mixed in with it. Over time, the grinding stones themselves wear down, and small particles end up in the flour, which means they also end up in the bread. So yes, ancient Egyptian bread occasionally contained a bit of bonus mineral content. You could call it a calcium supplement if you're feeling optimistic, or a dental hazard if you're being realistic. You brush some of the flour aside, watching how it falls in uneven little clumps. It's fascinating, in a quiet, slightly dusty way. There's something almost meditative about this process. A faint breeze moves through the grinding area, stirring up a light cloud of flour dust. It catches the sunlight, creating a soft, hazy glow. For a moment, you almost forget how tired you are. Almost across the courtyard, you can see more workers arriving. The bakery is fully in motion now, a carefully choreographed system. You're still figuring it out as you go, but you're starting to blend in at least enough that no one is rushing over to correct you, which, honestly, feels like a win. You pause briefly, wiping your hands on your linen garment, only to realize that this just spreads the flour around. Congratulations, you are now evenly coated in ancient Egyptian baking dust. Very on brand. Nearby, a more experienced worker begins to sift his flour through a woven sieve, separating out some of the larger particles. You watch for a moment, noting how he moves with quiet efficiency. This step isn't always done, especially for lower quality bread, but in a royal bakery, there's a bit more attention to detail. You try it yourself, lifting a portion of your ground flour. The finer particles fall through, leaving behind bits of husk and debris. It's a small improvement, but noticeable. Maybe Pharaoh prefers his bread slightly less crunchy. A thought crosses your mind. Somewhere, far in the future, people will pay extra for whole grain. As you continue working, you start to feel a strange sense of connection, not just to the people around you, but to the countless generations. The same motion, the same effort, the same quiet focus. It's humbling, in a way that sneaks up on you between moments of arm fatigue. The sun is climbing higher now, and the warmth in the bakery is becoming more noticeable. The ovens haven't even been fully fired up yet. You gather your finished flour into a small pile, brushing away any remaining debris. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. A worker gestures for you to bring your flour over to the next area. No words, just a quick nod. You lift the tray carefully. This is where things start to get interesting, because up until now, you've been preparing ingredients. What comes next is where the transformation really happens. Flour becomes dough, dough becomes bread, and somewhere in that process, something almost magical takes place, something that ancient Egyptians may not have fully understood, but definitely knew how to use. You set your tray down, take a slow breath, and prepare yourself for the next step. Your arms may be tired, but your day is far from over. You set your tray of coarse flour down among several others, each one slightly different in texture, color, and fineness. No two batches are exactly alike, and yet somehow, all of them will become bread. That's the quiet confidence of this place. A large clay basin sits in front of you, its edges worn smooth by years of use. Someone gestures for you to begin. You're handed a small jug of water. No measurements, no recipes, just instinct and the pressure of not embarrassing yourself. You pour the water slowly, watching as it darkens and clumps. At first it looks like nothing much, just damp grain sitting in a bowl. But then you reach in with your hands and everything changes. The texture is immediate, sticky, slightly gritty, and warmer than you expected. You begin to mix, folding the flour and water together, pressing and turning until it starts to form something cohesive. It's not smooth or elegant, but it's alive. You knead gently at first, unsure. The dough resists, then yields, then resists again. A nearby baker watches for a moment, then gives a small nod. Not approval exactly, but not disapproval either. You'll take it. Ancient Egyptian bread used just a few ingredients: flour, water, and a natural leavening agent. From these, they created dozens of different types. As you work the dough, you can feel something happening beneath your fingers, something subtle that isn't just about mixing ingredients. A second clay jar is brought over. This one is important, kept carefully near the prep area, almost guarded. You're instructed to add a small portion. Inside is a thick, bubbly mixture with a faintly sour, distinctive smell. This is the starter, the ancient sourdough. A living culture of wild yeast and bacteria maintained for years, maybe generations. You fold it into your dough. This is where the quiet transformation begins. This is what will make the bread rise and give it flavor. Somewhere in this jar is a lineage of yeast older than some royal dynasties. Ancient sourdough older than your concept of time. The texture changes, becoming more elastic and responsive. It stretches as you pull it, then relaxes back into itself. The air is warming steadily, softening the dough. This warm, humid environment is perfect for fermentation, completely accidental, but effective. A worker nearby chuckles as his dough sticks to his fingers. For a moment, there's a shared understanding. Dough has a sense of humor. You press your palms into the mixture. There's a rhythm now, a hypnotic motion. Knead, turn, press, repeat. Your earlier fatigue fades, replaced by a kind of quiet focus. This is the moment where everything starts to come together. Different types of bread require different textures. The bakers here know this instinctively, even if they don't write it down. One of the overseers walks through, observing without interfering. His presence keeps everyone just a little more attentive. Your dough is holding together now, forming a rough ball. You lift it slightly, feeling its weight. It's dense with potential. Just a short while ago, this was loose grain. Now it's something unified that will sustain everyone, from field workers to Pharaoh. You set the dough back and cover it with a cloth. It needs time for the starter to do its work and the texture to relax. You wipe your hands, accepting the flour and dough on your skin. It's part of the job now. You've crossed that line. The bakery hums with purpose. For the first time, you feel like you're not just observing, you're participating. You've made dough, which means the next step is coming soon. And that's where things really start to heat up. You let your hands rest for a moment, hovering just above the covered basin. as if the dough beneath the cloth might whisper back if you listen closely enough. It just sits there, quietly changing. The starter you mixed in, that slightly sour, bubbly mixture, has begun its work. Invisible to your eyes, the wild yeast and bacteria are feeding on the sugars, releasing tiny pockets of gas. You glance around and notice that every baker here treats this stage with a kind of quiet respect. No one rushes it. They know through experience or tradition that this part cannot be forced. Historians argue whether ancient Egyptians intentionally maintained sourdough starters or simply reused bits of old dough. But looking at how carefully that jar was handled, it's hard to believe they didn't recognize its importance. A worker passes by and gently lifts the edge of a cloth covering another batch. He doesn't touch the dough, just checks it, the way you might check on someone sleeping. You follow his example, lifting your own cloth just slightly. At first it looks the same, but then you notice a subtle difference. The surface is a bit softer, a bit more relaxed. Nearby, someone is tending to the starter jar again, stirring it slowly with a wooden stick. The smell is faintly tangy, a little earthy. It smells like continuity. Modern experiments have successfully recreated ancient Egyptian sourdough using yeast strains found on old pottery. In a real sense, people today have tasted bread remarkably similar to what you're making right now. You shift your weight, stretching your back. Around you, the bakery continues its steady rhythm. Some workers are grinding grain, others preparing more dough, while the ovens begin to glow. The air is changing. It's warmer now, thicker, carrying a mix of sense grain, smoke, and something faintly sweet from batches destined for the palace or temple. Time moves differently here. There's no clock, no timer. You measure progress by feel, by smell, by the subtle changes in texture. It's both freeing and slightly unsettling. A nearby baker finally uncovers his dough and begins to knead it again, gently this time, as if coaxing it into its next form. You watch closely. This is your cue. You begin to knead again, but with a lighter touch. The dough feels more cooperative, less resistant. It stretches between your fingers, then folds back on itself. This is the quiet magic of fermentation. No sparks, no dramatic transformation, just a slow, steady change that turns something dense into something airy, something alive. A worker beside you hums softly, a low rhythmic sound that blends with the bakery's noise. You shape the dough into a rough form, preparing it for the next stage. The sun is now fully above the horizon. Shadows have shortened, and the heat from the ovens is beginning to push outward, making the air shimmer slightly. You're not just following instructions anymore. You're starting to understand. And soon, you'll need to shape this into something that can survive the heat of those ovens. Because the calm part, it's about to give way to fire. You gather the dough in both hands, feeling its weight shift as it stretches. It is softer now, responsive, and almost cooperative. Around you, others move with quiet confidence. Their motions are practiced and efficient, each hand shaping dough with decades of muscle memory. You hesitate, watching closely. There is no single correct shape here. Some roll long ovals, while others flatten discs or form decorative cones. Ancient Egyptian bread came in dozens of forms. Archaeologists have found evidence of over 30 styles, from simple flatbreads to elaborate temple loaves. You place your portion on a flat surface and begin pressing it outward. It resists at first, then relaxes and spreads under your palms. You fold the edges inward and press again, smoothing the surface. It is not perfect, but it is bread-shaped as a solid step forward. The experienced baker glances over and subtly adjusts his own loaf, exaggerating the motion. It is a quiet kind of teaching that helps you improve. You follow along, refining your technique. Somewhere, a modern judge might critique the crumb structure, but here, you just hope it doesn't collapse. Once shaped, the loaves rest on woven trays. Some are plain, while others are marked with small indentations to identify their specific purpose. You add a simple pattern, pressing your fingers into the surface. These marks may be practical, or they may hold deep symbolic and spiritual meaning. Row after row of dough rests, each slightly different. It is satisfying to see this field of edible sculptures waiting for the next stage. During the second resting period, internal gases expand. Some loaves puff slightly, their surfaces smoothing out. A worker gently taps one to test readiness. The heat in the bakery intensifies as the clay ovens come alive. It radiates outward like a steady, dry cloak wrapping around you. Some ovens are tall cones. Dough is slapped onto the hot inner walls where it sticks and bakes quickly. It is efficient and risky. Your loaves are destined for a more conventional placement, but the heat alone makes you reconsider your life choices as you return to your dough. You carefully lift your loaf. It is delicate now, full of air. Too much pressure could deflate it. Too little care could ruin the shape. The air shimmers visibly here. This is where calm preparation meets the intense, unforgiving fire. Timing and placement matter more than ever. You take a slow breath, steadying yourself. Your next move determines if this bread is worthy of a royal table or something best forgotten. You step closer to the oven, and the heat greets you like an over-enthusiastic host who doesn't understand personal space. It's immediate, intense, and oddly dry, like standing too close to a desert sun that decided to move indoors. Your skin tightens, your eyes narrow slightly, and you suddenly understand why nobody here lingers near the ovens unless they absolutely have to. The clay structure in front of you looks simple enough, rounded, thick-walled, with a wide opening that reveals a glowing interior. But simple does not mean forgiving. Inside, the heat radiates from every surface, the result of carefully managed fires burning long before you arrived. The flames themselves have died down, leaving behind a deep, steady warmth stored in the oven walls. A baker beside you reaches in with a long-handled tool, shifting the remaining embers to one side. He moves quickly, confidently, as if the heat barely registers anymore. You, on the other hand, are trying not to blink too much. Ancient Egyptian ovens like this were designed to retain heat efficiently, baking multiple batches of bread without needing constant refueling. It's a practical design, especially in a place where fuel, while available, still needed to be used wisely. Historians argue whether these ovens were standardized or varied by region. This one feels like a well-tested solution, refined through generations. You watch as another baker places his loaf inside, using a flat wooden paddle to slide it onto the hot surface. The motion is smooth, almost effortless. The dough settles instantly, and within seconds, you can see the edges beginning to firm up. No pressure. You step forward, gripping your own paddle a bit more tightly than necessary. Your loaf rests on it, slightly wobbling, as if it's also aware of the stakes here. You angle the paddle toward the oven opening. This is the moment. You slide the loaf off the paddle and onto the hot surface. It lands with a soft, almost satisfying sound. No sticking, no folding, no immediate disaster. The baker next to you gives a barely noticeable nod. Again, not approval exactly, but definitely not disapproval. You're building a reputation here. You step back slightly, allowing space for others to place their loaves. The oven fills gradually, each piece positioned with care. There's no timer here, no digital display. Everything is judged by sight, smell, and experience. You watch closely. At first, nothing dramatic happens. The dough sits, absorbing the heat, its surface beginning to dry slightly. Then, slowly, it starts to change. The edges firm up, the top develops a faint golden hue, and small cracks appear. A light joke slips into your thoughts. This is the ancient equivalent of staring into an oven window, except the window is a hole. The smell begins to shift as well. The raw, sour scent of the dough gives way to something warmer, richer, unmistakably bread-like. For a moment, you forget about the heat, the pressure, the fact that you're standing in a royal bakery with very high expectations. A worker nearby uses a long stick to gently rotate one of the loaves, ensuring it cooks evenly. The motion is precise. You lean slightly closer, careful not to get too near, and observe your own loaf. It hasn't collapsed. It's working. Sweat forms along your temples, tracing slow paths down your neck. You resist the urge to wipe it away. Your hands are still dusted with flour, and you're not sure adding a layer of dough paste to your face is the look you're going for. Across the oven area, another baker is placing flat pieces of dough directly against the inner wall of a taller oven. A quirky detail. This method of baking is still used in various parts of the world today. You're watching a technique thousands of years old. You'll return focus to your own loaf, noticing the edges are firm, the top a deeper golden color. It's nearing completion. A baker beside you reaches in and carefully lifts one of his loaves out, placing it onto a nearby surface to cool. You prepare yourself. When your loaf is ready, you'll need to act quickly but carefully. Too soon, and it's undercooked. Too late, and it risks burning. There's a narrow window, and you're about to step right into it. No pressure, right? You watch, you wait, and you try to trust your instincts, such as they are, because in just a few moments, you'll be reaching into that oven, and whatever comes out will be the result of everything you've done. You reach in with the long-handled tool, trying to mimic the calm precision you've seen from the others. The heat surges toward you again, wrapping around your arm like a warning you are absolutely choosing to ignore. You slide the edge of the tool beneath your loaf, lift gently, and manage to bring it out in one piece. It lands on the cooling surface with a soft, hollow sound. You pause. It's bread. Actual bread. Not burned. Not flattened. You've crossed a threshold here. You are now someone who has successfully produced bread in a royal Egyptian bakery, which, honestly, feels like something you should be allowed to brag about at dinner parties. If dinner parties existed here, the surface is firm, lightly golden, with the faint pattern you pressed into it still visible. You decide to call it authentic and intentional. Around you, more loaves are being removed from the ovens, each one placed in neat rows. The air is now thick with the smell of freshly baked bread, warm, earthy, slightly sweet. But there's no time to linger. You begin to notice something else now, the structure, the order. At the top, you've already seen the overseers, those quiet figures with their tablets and watchful eyes. They don't do the manual work, but they control the flow. They decide how much grain is used and where it all goes. Below them are the master bakers, the ones who move with confidence, who make decisions without hesitation. They shape the most important loaves, oversee the ovens, and offer those small, wordless corrections that keep everything running smoothly. Then there are the workers like you. They handle the grinding, the mixing, the shaping, the endless repetition of tasks. And then, at the very bottom, there are the laborers who carry the grain and clean the spaces. Everyone has a role. Ancient Egyptian society was deeply structured, and even within a bakery, that structure is visible. Your position fits somewhere in the middle. Historians argue if workers were free or bound. What's clear is that bread itself functioned as a kind of currency. People were paid in loaves, in beer, in basic provisions that sustained daily life. You're not just making food, you're making wages. You glance back at your loaf. It will be recorded and eventually distributed, maybe to a worker, a priest, or even someone in the palace. A worker nearby begins stacking cool bread into large woven baskets, arranging them carefully to avoid crushing the softer pieces. You step in to help, lifting one of your loaves and placing it gently into a basket. It's still warm, the heat lingering in your hands. If modern people complain about earning their bread, they might want to try this version first. It's a bit more literal. You notice subtle differences between the loaves. The finest ones will likely go to the palace, while ordinary ones go to laborers. A master baker walks by, inspecting the baskets. He pauses, adjusts a loaf slightly, then moves on. Nothing is left to chance. You begin to understand that this bakery isn't just about producing bread, it's about maintaining a system, a steady, reliable flow of food that supports everything from daily labor to religious ritual to royal comfort. The heat from the ovens continues to radiate outward, but you've grown more accustomed to it. It becomes part of the rhythm. The grinding area, the mixing basins, the oven zit, all fits together in a way that feels inevitable, as if it has always been this way. You pick up another loaf, place it into a basket, and move on to the next, because the work isn't finished yet, not even close. In the golden heart of the Nile, life follows the ancient rhythm of the hearth. For the Egyptians, bread was the very pulse of existence, a sacred gift. From light, airy loaves for the elite to dense barley cakes for the workers, every crust told a story of class, craft, and survival in the desert heat. But this was no mere bakery. It was a mint where sustenance was forged into currency. These baskets weren't just meals, they were the wages of a nation. Beyond these walls, thousands of builders toiled under the sun. Their sweat was the fuel, but this bread was the engine that kept the society running. When a worker received a loaf, he held his livelihood. In a world before coins, a handful of grain was the ultimate measure of a day's hard work. The system was precise. Baskets were sorted and marked, distinguishing the rations of a master mason from those of a common stone carrier with meticulous care. Not every loaf was perfect. The baker carefully sets aside the smaller, flatter yields, ensuring that every scrap is accounted for in the daily distribution. This cycle mirrored the Nile itself. Just as the river flooded and receded, the grain was harvested, baked, and returned to the people who tilled the soil. The bakery functioned as a living organism. It was a hub of constant movement, where the raw potential of the fields met the structured needs of the state. A young laborer pauses, his eyes lingering on the fresh supply. It is the silent hunger of a man who knows his strength depends on these daily rations. Overlooking this flow was the scribe. With his papyrus and reed pen, he acted as the ancient software, recording every loaf to ensure the empire's debts were paid. In the shadows, a moment of relief. A worker breaks off a piece of an imperfect loaf. It is a small necessity and indulgence amidst the hard work. Specialty loaves, enriched with dates or honey, were reserved for the higher tiers of the hierarchy, marked for the temple or the palace elite. As the sun reaches its zenith, the heat in the courtyard becomes a physical weight, pressing down on the dust and the frantic pace of the daily distribution. Baskets are hoisted onto shoulders, beginning their journey to the great work sites and the royal tables, carrying the energy of the Nile's harvest to the world. The baker watches them leave. He understands that his work is the foundation. Without his fire and flour, the great monuments of Egypt would never rise. As the workspace falls empty, the silence is only temporary. For as long as the sun rises, the fires must be lit, and the unending cycle must begin again. You watch the baskets being lifted and carried away, each one disappearing into the wider world beyond the bakery walls. For a moment, it feels like the end of something, but it isn't. Not here. The rhythm continues, and now your attention shifts. Not all bread is destined for hungry workers or palace tables. Some of it is meant for the gods. The movements here aren't rushed, they're measured, almost ceremonial. The space itself understands that something more than daily sustenance is happening. On a low table, you see smaller portions of dough being prepared. These are shaped with more precision, more attention to detail. Some are formed into neat rounds, others into small cones, and a few into shapes that look almost symbolic patterns, representing divine offerings. Ancient Egyptian religion was deeply intertwined with everyday life, and food offerings were a central part of that connection. Bread was more than just nourishment. It was a gift, a gesture, a way of maintaining balance between the human and divine. Historians still argue whether the gods were believed to physically consume these offerings, or if the act itself held the true significance. Either way, the bread you're about to help prepare is treated with a level of care that feels different. The motions are slower, more deliberate. You press gently, smoothing the surface, forming a clean, symmetrical shape. It's less about efficiency and more about intention. Your breathing seems to slow down, matching the pace of the work. A nearby worker adds a drizzle of honey or a bit of crushed dates. These additions are rare, reserved for special loaves. A quiet thought drifts through your mind. The gods, it seems, have a slightly more luxurious menu than the average worker. You continue shaping your piece, trying to make it as even as possible. It carries a sense of care that feels important. These loaves will be baked just like the rest, but their destination is very different. You watch as they're carefully transferred toward a smaller oven, one that seems reserved for this purpose. No rushed movements, no casual adjustments. Everything is done with quiet attention and respect. In tomb paintings, bread offerings are depicted in elaborate stacks, meant to sustain the deceased in the afterlife. Bread wasn't just for the living or even the gods, but also for those who had already passed on. Imagine them placed on an altar, surrounded by incense, light, and quiet reverence. It's a journey beyond hunger. The baking process is just as careful. The loaves are placed into the oven with precision, monitored closely. They're removed at just the right moment. No overbaking, no uneven coloring. They are beautiful in their simplicity. The focus isn't on volume, it's on quality. You've contributed to something tied to belief and tradition. A worker gently covers the finished loaves with a cloth, shielding them from the general chaos of the bakery. They'll be taken elsewhere soon, perhaps to a temple or a private shrine within the palace. You step back, giving the space distance. Back in the main area, the usual pace continues, grinding, mixing, baking. But here, for a brief moment, everything feels slightly still. You take a slow breath, because even in a place defined by labor and heat, there are moments where bread becomes something more. Deep within the heart of ancient Egypt, the royal bakery hums with a rhythmic vitality. In this sun-drenched vault, the morning light pours through high apertures, illuminating a world of dust and flour. Most of the production is focused on the daily sustenance of the empire loaves, of course. Gritty bread made from standard grain. It is the fuel for a nation, functional and honest. But occasionally, the rhythm changes. A special batch is prepared, distinguished by its color and texture. This is the beginning of the enriched royal dough, a rare luxury in the desert heat. The master baker, a man of quiet precision, begins the infusion. He meticulously folds in pieces of dark, sun-dried dates, ensuring every bite will be filled with concentrated sweetness. To elevate it further, an amber stream of wild honey is added. This liquid gold binds the ingredients together, transforming simple sustenance into a culinary masterpiece fit for the gods. Under the soft neoclassical glow of the bakery vault, the baker shapes the loaf. It is a slow, deliberate process where the dough is treated with the reverence of a sacred object. The difference is palpable. Unlike the gritty texture common to the Egyptian diet, this enriched loaf is smooth and refined, a testament to the finest ingredients available to the crown. In this space, every movement becomes more careful. The workers handle these special loaves with a heightened sense of duty, aware that these are destined for the royal table. The scale of production tells the story of hierarchy. While thousands of standard loaves are baked for the masses, only a small, precious few of these enriched breads are ever created. The time for the fire has come. The loaves are carried toward the intense, orange glow of the clay ovens, where the heat will finalize the transformation of the baker's art. Inside the clay walls, the honey begins to bubble. The sugars from the dates caramelize, infusing the crust with a deep, dark sweetness and a glistening golden sheen. As the bread is removed, a fragrant steam fills the air. It is the scent of luxurious wheat, earthy and warm, captured in a perfectly baked crust that shines like polished bronze. Cooled and ready, the loaves are arranged on an ornate tray. They will soon leave the heat of the bakery for the cool, limestone halls of the palace, serving as a symbol of royal favor. With the royal task complete, the focus shifts back to the ordinary. The master returns to the simple dough station, where the work of feeding the kingdom continues without pause. The bakery returns to its steady, industrious rhythm. In the shadow of the pyramids, the contrast between the common and the divine is found even in a single loaf of bread. You return to your usual station, the brief encounter with honey and dates already fading into the background as the steady, practical rhythm of the bakery pulls you back in. The air feels thicker now, heavier with heat and fine dust. It clings to your skin, settles into the folds of your clothing, and somehow finds its way into places you didn't know existed. You brush at your arm, only to watch a faint cloud of flour rise and drift lazily away. At this point, you're less a person and more a lightly dusted artifact. The floor beneath you is no cleaner. It's a mixture of packed earth, stray grains, and a thin layer of flour that has built up over time. Cleanliness here is relative. Ancient Egyptian bakeries were not sterile environments. They were functional, efficient, and, by necessities, somewhat chaotic. Grain comes in from the fields, often carrying bits of dirt, chaff, and the occasional uninvited guest. And those guests, you spot one almost immediately. A small insect making its way along the edge of a grain basket, completely unbothered by the scale of human activity. You try not to think too much about it. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians had effective methods for controlling pests, or if a certain level of contamination was simply accepted as unavoidable. Based on what you're seeing, it's safe to say perfection wasn't the goal, survival and consistency were. It's not exactly a modern hygiene standard. A worker nearby shakes out a cloth, sending a small burst of dust into the air. You instinctively turn your head, blinking as a few particles drift your way. Tools are reused, constantly grinding stones, mixing basins, paddles. They're wiped, sometimes rinsed, but not in the way you might expect from a modern kitchen. There's no endless supply of clean water for washing everything between uses. The Nile provides, but it also demands efficiency. Some ancient texts suggest that certain substances like natron, a naturally occurring salt, were used for cleaning. You pick up a cloth and wipe your work surface. The heat continues to build, and with it comes a new set of challenges. Sweat mixes with flour, creating a kind of paste on your skin that feels gritty. A worker nearby lets out a quiet exhale, wiping his forehead with the back of his arm. You share a brief look, no words, just mutual understanding. You glance toward the storage bins again, noticing a cat now perched near one of them, tail curled neatly around its body. It watches the space with calm eyes. You can't help but feel a small sense of reassurance. Ancient Egyptian pest control, powered by cats and mild optimism. You return to your dough, preparing another batch. The process feels familiar now, almost automatic. Mix, knead, shape. Your hands move with more confidence. You notice that some workers are more careful than others, covering their dough tightly, keeping tools cleaner. It's not uniform, but standards matter. Across the bakery, a minor commotion draws your attention. A basket has tipped slightly, spilling a small amount of grain onto the floor. Nothing is wasted. Even grain that touches the ground is collected, sifted if necessary, and put back into use. Every bit counts. This bakery isn't about perfection, it's about continuity, keeping the system moving, day after day, with whatever resources are available. You resume your work, shaping another loaf, placing it among the others. The routine continues, steady and predictable, because here, you don't wait for perfect conditions. You work with what you have, and somehow, it's enough. You notice the baskets filling faster now. The steady output of the ovens turning into something that needs to move quickly, efficiently, without hesitation. Bread doesn't linger here. It has somewhere to go, and that journey is already beginning. A pair of workers steps forward, lifting one of the heavier baskets together. The motion is practiced, balanced, careful enough to keep the loaves from shifting. You watch how they move, shoulders aligned, step steady, because carrying bread through a busy palace isn't as simple as it sounds. One wrong step, and you're explaining to an overseer why half a basket of bread is now decorating the floor. You're handed a smaller basket. You adjust your grip, feeling the woven sides press into your hands, the warmth of the bread still radiating through it. It's a strange comfort. You follow the others toward the exit, stepping out of the bakery into the brighter, open space beyond. The air outside feels almost cool. The shift is immediate: less smoke, less dust, more light. The palace complex stretches out around you, a network of courtyards, corridors, and open walkways. People move with purpose: servants, officials, laborers, each one part of a larger system that feels both organized and constantly in motion. You keep your eyes on the path ahead, careful not to stumble. The ground here is smoother, more maintained than the bakery floor. Ancient Egyptian palaces were not just homes, they were administrative centers, hubs of activity where food, goods, and information flowed continuously. Historians argue whether bread distribution followed strict daily schedules or adapted fluidly. Judging by the stream of baskets, there's definitely a system in place. You pass through a shaded corridor, the walls painted with faint patterns, geometric designs, perhaps, or scenes that have faded over time. The air here is cooler, the light softer, and for a moment, the weight of the basket feels a little less demanding. A servant steps aside to let you pass, glancing briefly at the bread before continuing on. There's no ceremony here. This is routine. You emerge into another courtyard, this one closer to the inner areas of the palace. The activity here is more refined, fewer laborers, more structure. You instinctively straighten a bit, adjusting your posture without fully realizing it. The basket in your hands suddenly feels more important. A worker ahead of you turns toward a side entrance, and you follow, stepping into a space that feels distinctly different from the bakery. Cleaner, quieter, more controlled. This is where the bread begins to separate into its final destinations. You set your basket down on a low table. Immediately, another group of workers begins sorting through the loaves. They move quickly but carefully, selecting certain pieces, setting others aside. You recognize some of the patterns, now the slightly finer loaves. The more evenly shaped ones, these are being chosen for the palace interior. Your loaf, you spot it among the others, its faint markings still visible. It's picked up, inspected briefly, then placed into a separate tray. You feel a small sense of pride. It's subtle, but it's there. If bread had a promotion system, yours just got a decent upgrade. The remaining loaves are sorted into other baskets, likely for distribution to staff. Nothing is wasted. Bread quietly reinforces the structure of society. The basket you carried is now empty, its contents absorbed into the larger system. But you don't leave just yet. Instead, you watch. It's not just about feeding people. It's about maintaining order, supporting hierarchy, and ensuring that everything runs smoothly. A worker gestures for you to take the empty basket back. No words, just a quick motion. You nod, lifting it again, now noticeably lighter. As you turn to leave, you glance once more at the tray where your loaf was placed. It's already being carried further inside. You wonder who will eat it: a servant, an official, someone seated at a polished table, maybe even probably not Pharaoh himself. Still, the thought lingers. You step back into the corridor, the quiet hum of the palace surrounding you, and begin the walk back toward the bakery. Because while the bread has moved on, your work is still waiting. In the heart of ancient Egypt, life begins with the sun and the soil. Here, the essence of the empire is forged by humble hands, The heat of the ovens is the heartbeat of the city, a constant rhythm of grinding grain and kneading dough for the masses. A simple bakery worker, skin-tanned by the desert sun, picks up an empty woven basket. His duty takes him beyond these smoky walls. He steps away from the roar of the fires and into the cool limestone corridors of the royal palace, where the air grows still. A passing attendant, draped in fine white linen, offers a subtle gesture toward a refined, quiet hallway hidden from the common path. The worker hesitates, then explores the new path. The transition is striking from the clatter of labor to the hallowed silence of the elite. Here, the air is scented with lotus and incense. The rough stone gives way to smooth, painted surfaces that reflect the soft light. He pauses at the edge of a wide, calm chamber, staying in the shadows to witness the transformation of his morning's toil. Inside the elite dining hall, palace attendants move with quiet precision, arranging low tables in a perfect, symmetric dance of order. The humble loaves he helped bake are now presented as art. They are enriched with honey and dates, glistening under the soft palace glow. The bread is displayed alongside exotic fruits and golden bowls, reflecting the immense wealth and divine social order of the kingdom. Contrast the workers' flour-dusted hands, symbols of production, against the cold, polished perfection of the royal table arrangement. There is no palace without the field, no royalty without the worker. It is a delicate balance of sweat and gold that sustains Egypt. With a final look at the splendor, the worker quietly retraces his steps, returning to the familiar heat and motion of the bakery courtyard. He sets down the empty basket and picks up his tools. The cycle continues, from grain to bread, from labor to majesty, forever. The rhythm of the bakery begins to soften almost without you noticing at first. It doesn't stop. Nothing here truly stops, but it eases. The urgency fades into something slower, steadier, like a long breath, finally being released after hours of effort. The ovens, once fierce and glowing, now radiate a gentler heat. The brightest embers have dimmed, leaving behind a quiet warmth. You stand near one of them for a moment, no longer bracing yourself against the intensity, just feeling it. Your hands move more slowly now as you finish a final task, brushing stray flour from a surface, stacking a few remaining tools, adjusting a cloth over a resting batch of dough that will likely be used tomorrow. There's no rush. The main work has already been done. You glance around. The grinding stones are still. The baskets are mostly empty or set aside. The steady hum of activity has softened into scattered movement, workers finishing up, exchanging quiet words, preparing to leave. Ancient Egyptian bakeries like this one likely operated on a daily cycle, closely tied to the rising and setting of the sun. While some preparation may have continued into the evening, the bulk of the labor happened early, aligning with the natural rhythm of the day. Standing here now, as the energy fades, it feels like a place that resets rather than runs endlessly. A worker nearby stretches his arms, rolling his shoulders with a soft exhale. You feel the same impulse. Your muscles have settled into a deep, steady fatigue, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present, earned. You lower yourself onto a low ledge near the wall, the stone still warm beneath you. It feels surprisingly comforting. For the first time since you arrived, you're not moving with purpose. You're just here. A faint breeze drifts in through the open doorway, carrying with it the softer scents of the evening, the Nile. Distant greenery, something faintly floral. It blends with the lingering smell of baked bread and ash, creating a quiet, familiar atmosphere. You close your eyes for a moment, not fully, just enough to rest them. A gentle thought surfaces. Somewhere, beyond these walls, people are eating the bread you helped make. Workers finishing their day, servants preparing for the next, perhaps even someone seated at a quiet table within the palace. The loaves have traveled on, becoming part of other lives, other routines. You don't see those moments, but you are part of what made them possible. A light, sleepy humor drifts through your mind. After all this work, you'd think someone might offer you at least a small piece of bread. But no, apparently, the ancient Egyptian bakery comes with excellent experience and very limited snacks. You almost smile. Across the space, the cat you noticed earlier has curled into itself near the grain bins, tail tucked neatly, eyes half closed. Even it seems to understand that the day is winding down. You rest your hands on your knees, feeling the faint roughness of flour still clinging to your skin. You could brush it away, but there's no real need. It's part of the day now, part of the quiet record your body keeps. The walls of the bakery, darkened by years of smoke, seemed to hold on to the memory of countless days just like this one. Countless hands, countless loaves, countless quiet efforts that kept everything moving forward. And now, you've added your own small part to that history. The light outside begins to soften, shifting from bright gold to something gentler, more muted. Shadows lengthen across the floor, stretching slowly as if they, too, are settling in for rest. You take another slow breath. The air feels different now, cooler, calmer, less demanding. Your thoughts begin to slow with it. The details of the day, grinding, kneading, shaping, baking, start to blur at the edges, not disappearing, just softening, like the surface of dough before it's shaped, smoothing out, becoming something quieter. You let your shoulders relax, let your hands rest, let the warmth around you settle into something steady and reassuring. There's nothing more you need to do, no more grain to sort, no more dough to knead, no more loaves to carry, just this moment, this quiet space at the end of a long, steady day. The bakery itself settling into stillness, ready to begin again when the sun returns, and you, for now, simply resting within it. Let your breathing slow, let the sounds fade, let the warmth carry you gently into stillness, and as the last light softens and the day finally lets go, you can drift with it, knowing that everything that needed to be done has been done.